We encourage you to hit the subscribe button right now so you can listen to more podcasts of Operation Truth. Ladies and gentlemen, we do want to hear from you, so we encourage you to email us directly at operationtruthofficial@gmail.com. I want you to know that your messages are likely to be heard, addressed, and listened to on air.
Operation Truth, the show they don't want you to see. Now, here's your host, Lou.
Hi, everyone. This is Lou Palumbo. With me, as always, is my co-host, Tom Fuentes. Tom's former assistant director of the FBI. And before I forget, Tom, please re-invite Chris Schwecker, because I know that this issue of the border is near and dear to his heart. And people, if they're wondering why we talk about it almost every single podcast, is because it is of the utmost importance that we get our arms around what's going on our southern border. If you don't believe me, listen to what's going on in Chicago, Maine, New York City, the Yuma sector in Arizona, Democrat Governor Hobbs. This is going to redefine this country. And by the way, while we're talking about this, we have people coming in through that southern border. They're not Mexican. They're from all over this country. And that lends itself to a comment I've made to you before, that where did anyone ever get the notion that the intent of the founding fathers was to open the doors to this entire planet into this one country and think we were all going to get taken care of, that all of our needs or all of our likes or wants were going to be addressed? It just doesn't work that way. We're having, I have to say one thing to you guys. I'm watching the pro-Palestinian demonstrations in New York, and I keep talking about New York because I'm born and raised in that city. I went to 16 years of school in the city. They're in protesting, anti-Semitic, against the war. I got it. So you figured the way to get us to become warm to you is to go and attempt to disrupt the tree lighting, which is a Christian holiday or experience. And then on Christmas Day, protesting in New York City to cancel Christmas. Maybe there's a bigger message going on here about this thing with Islam. Something that is irrefutable is that there's a cultural disconnect with this demographic. And it doesn't mean there aren't good people that are Muslim, but there are. But as a whole, folks, you should take a real good look at how Muslim men treat their women, just to start. How Muslim cultures treat gays, just to start. And it goes on and on. Some of the countries, the manner in which they manage their criminal element is a bit to the extreme. Like if you steal, they dismember your arm or your wrist. And this is not fiction, this is fact. And I won't tell you how I know so much about it, but I brushed up against it. In any event, I told you before, when we closed the last podcast, that I wanted to go back into this January 6th discussion, because in addition to things that were spoken to by Tom quite intelligently regarding January 6th, I want to ask Tom a question. It's kind of a simple question. If I was planning an insurrection to overthrow the government in Washington, D.C., would I have suggested that the National Guard come in, which, by the way, was turned down by the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, and the mayor? And I want you to correct me factually if I'm wrong. So we understand, ladies and gentlemen, I want to overthrow the government, but I want to put into place the counter to that, which is the National Guard. Tom? Your thoughts, please.
That's exactly right, Lou. The president offered the troops to go in and secure the Capitol. They knew from intelligence reporting, they should have known probably from the inside FBI agents that were with these protesters on their way to D.C. on January 4th and 5th, leading up to the 6th, that the president, being well aware that there's going to be a huge demonstration at the Capitol, and anytime you have that kind of emotion gathered in one place by that many people, bad things could happen. And spontaneously, you could have an attack on the building. So therefore, and if not necessarily an attack like in a military sense, it's not the Alamo, but just in a trespass sense, go inside when you don't belong inside during non-business functions. But in any event, he offers the National Guard. Mayor Bowser of D.C. says, no, thanks. Never mind. I don't know that she said thanks. She said no. You have Pelosi saying no. And the sergeant at arms and the other security officials of the Capitol say no need. And then, which also lends some credence to, was it a setup? Was it an entrapment setup where they basically thought, let's not have National Guard here. Let's not have extra police officers here. Let this crowd come in and let the undercover agents lead them into the building and create the situation that they've capitalized politically ever since the insurrection. The attempt to overthrow our government, the worst thing to happen to our country since Pearl Harbor and the Civil War combined. So that's the kind of rhetoric that came out of this. And, here's all the evidence. Not only that, but the committee, the J6 committee set up by Pelosi, was not a true, constitutionally true committee of the Congress, because if it was a committee, the Republicans get to pick who they want on the committee. The Democrats get to pick who they want. And as you recall, Jim Jordan and others that were suggested to be on the committee were refused by Pelosi. The only Republicans that she wanted on there were phony Republicans like Liz Cheney and Kinzinger, both Republicans theoretically, but for all practical purposes, Democrats. So meantime, something that hasn't gotten shown a lot, but when the committee started day one, they wanted to play President Trump at the White House giving his speech. And in his speech, they edit out the part where he says, go to the Capitol and protest peacefully and patriotically. They edit that part out. So you just have Trump telling people go to the Capitol and protest. So that adds to, he wanted the insurrection. He was an insurrectionist and all of this. So the committee, was basically improper, illegal, unconstitutional, and a sham in the first place. In the second place, they conduct all of these interviews, depositions behind closed doors, all of the various witnesses brought in, all of the effort to gather all that information. Well, now that the committee is no more, and Trump and his attorneys want to subpoena or want to get a hold of that information for discovery purposes, the committee people in the House are saying, oh, we destroyed all that material. It's gone. What? First of all, if it was a legitimate committee, that would be illegal, because the Federal Records Act requires that information gathered during the course of the government doing business has to be kept. That was the issue with Hillary Clinton destroying all the emails when they subpoenaed her 33,000 emails, and it come to find out she destroyed the devices and hammered them and used bleach bit and other things to wipe out the information. That's illegal just by itself, because those were federal records of government business, even though she set that up on a private server, actually to avoid being accountable, to avoid having to abide by the law, which says those records have to be kept. And so you have this sham committee. They do all of this, spend millions of dollars, then throw the evidence out because probably they don't like the outcome, that it basically would clear Trump and clear the insurrectionists of just being protesters. And, that was them doing business. So now, you have the aftermath of that, of more than 1,000 people prosecuted, picked up under FBI investigations, and they're saying there could be another 200 or 300 more that need to be arrested and picked up on this case. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable to me that this would still be ongoing all this time. Now, another issue that doesn't get talked about enough, you remember when Tucker Carlson was still at Fox, and the Speaker of the House, McCarthy, said, we're going to give your staff all of the 40,000 hours of video taken inside the Capitol on January 6th. Now later, Tucker on the air shows the shaman with the horn hat on his head and show him walking around. And it turns out he'd already been locked up for 3 years. He's being escorted through the Capitol like he's on a tour by 2 Capitol police officers, Capitol Hill officers. They take him into the Senate chambers where he offers a prayer, praying for the police and thanking them, and then they escort him out of the building. Well, he gets sentenced to more than 3 years in prison. Some of the time he did in solitary confinement. Now, mysteriously, after that video shows, where the police are just escorting him peacefully around the building. After that shows on Fox News, he's released. So he's out. Now, in the meantime, I had speculated that the reason that the House did not want those videos, or the Senate for that matter, did not want videos, that 40,000 hours of video generally released to the public, is because it would probably show that there were undercover agents and informants in the crowd going through. And what I said might happen, hypothetically, is that somebody sitting at home watching TV, seeing the videos of the protests, would say, oh, I know that guy. He's my next door neighbor. He's an FBI agent walking around in a Trump t-shirt and a MAGA hat and all that. So I think that's why back then, even to this day, they don't want all those videos released to the public because they're afraid of the bad things that will happen. Now, testimony by Christopher Wray on that issue is that, well, you know, that's we didn't have anybody in there, but that's not the issue. We don't know if those videos should be released. You know, actually his usual skirting around the truth, I think, during his testimony.
You know, Tom, the thing I've also noticed, and maybe you can correct this, I did not hear of one instance where anyone entered the Capitol with a firearm. And the only discharge of a firearm was carried out by a Capitol Police superior. I believe the gentleman was a lieutenant who shot and killed an unarmed woman, ironically. So, and this is just to give the public food for thought.
Now, interesting, if I can stop you right there, Lou, and this is important. It's just recently come out that that lieutenant, well, two things about the lieutenant. He since has been promoted to captain. But in the first place, that lieutenant made a phone call to their communications center on the right after he shot Ashley Babbitt. Immediately afterward, within a minute, he puts in a call saying, we're under fire, they're shooting at us, we're going to have to shoot back, trying to cover his tracks that he had just shot her, which to me indicates he knew that what he did was murder. She had no business being shot. She was not assaulting anyone. She was not threatening anyone. She was not carrying a weapon. He just shot her flat out. And you see it on the video, the gun, you know, through the window pointed at her and then discharging. And she's on the other side of the windows or the door. And then she falls backwards, having been shot in the neck. And more information has come out about that police officer, other disciplinary. At one point, his personal car was carjacked by some teenagers. And as the car is driving away, he opens fire on the car, shooting at the vehicle. So he got in trouble for that one. So this is somebody that has less than a stellar record, yet he's been portrayed in the media and by the police. He's a hero. He got medals. He got awards. What a great guy. And he shot her in cold blood. And there's little, if anything. Now, all of the different police shootings that we've seen, that I've witnessed, you know, the investigations of after the fact, or the 10 years that I was on CNN as a law enforcement contributor, anytime there was a major shooting by a police officer somewhere, and especially if the victim was killed by that police officer, oh, the hue and cry, we need investigation, we need the FBI, we need all of this investigative activity to happen to prove that it was a lawful shooting. None of that in this case. He's proclaimed a hero, a martyr, the whole thing. None of that significant investigation of her murder afterward. So I'm sorry, go ahead with the...
You know, Tom, I hear everything you say, and the really tragic part of this discussion is that the common denominator to all of our discussions, whether it has to do with the way the borders are managed, how your cities are managed, how your media conducts itself, how the FBI conducts itself, how our elected officials conduct themselves, how the presidents of major universities like MIT and Harvard and UPenn, or our scientists, or our medical professionals all conduct themselves. We are just destroying the credibility of the institutions that we need to believe in and to trust. So when we go back to January 6th, I want to make sure that the public understands that you need to trust an FBI, and all you have to do is listen to or read the text messages that took place between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page in regards to preventing Donald Trump from becoming president. If you wonder if there's trouble in paradise, ladies and gentlemen, there is. And the purpose of this podcast is to try to spread some legitimate explanation and truth, and hopefully motivate the public to get off your rear ends, put down your laptops, and stop planning your vacations. Your country is slipping through your fingers. I have no political agenda. I'm not backing anybody at this point. Tom and I are still, like most people, if you're smart, you're on the learning curve, because, we've got people flipping and flopping and ducking and dodging, and very few people are consistent in their message. I mean, depending on who you want to listen to. We're just out here because we're concerned about the future of our young people. We have to reinstill some credibility. What happened on January 6th should never have happened, period. By the way, where were they over the weekend with the Palestinians converging on the White House, trying to tear down the gate and threatening the federal agents that are empowered to protect it? Where is the other police? You want to talk about insurrection? When you shut down highways in a city like New York or Los Angeles, the 110 freeway, that prevents your emergency medical services to getting to people in cardiac arrest, or children struck by autos, or choking. What is insurrection? I mean, maybe we need to really redefine what this term is, but I want to say to you with certitude, what happened on January 6th was completely inappropriate. You have the right to protest. You have the right to lawfully assemble, not to shut down our cities, period. For the knucklehead that put his feet up on the desk of Nancy Pelosi, there has to be some level of accountability. I don't necessarily if it should translate to incarceration. Maybe a good 5,000 fine will ring you a chime. And then if you don't want to pay that, maybe we'll give you a little jail stint in lieu of that. But the punishment has to be fit to crime. Tom will tell you numbers of people that if they were in proximity of the Capitol have been prosecuted. And guys, if you want to know how, it's all this technology you're carrying. We're pinging your phones. We're triangulating you. It is absolutely ridiculous. And I absolutely guarantee you there were drones above. But I still go back to a basic fundamental question that haunts me the most. Why would a person who is trying to overthrow the government try to employ the mechanism called the National Guard, which would stand in direct opposition to his exercise? Just a question of common sense, guys. The problem is we have no credibility in this government or any institution that surrounds it. And to give you a little bigger tie-in, because we speak about this sometimes off air, I bring it up. We've got a whole generation of children or two, which we have lost. We're quick to label them Generation X, Generation Z. They're useless. I hear everything you're saying about them. They come into this world after we've destroyed the credibility of every institution that they need to believe in coming out of the womb, guys. Take some responsibility here. Try to rebuild a fence or a bridge back into these children, which is something that I'd like to do. And I tell people this. I tell the guru, the architect of this, Brian Williams, I want to go to these college campuses and speak to the children. The more liberal, the better, because they're entitled to an explanation as to why this country is in such disarray. And if you're content with the way it's being run, if you're okay with the fact that your cost of living has gone up 17.6% since this man took office, vote for him. I think that's the direction you should go. If you're content with the borders being flooded as they were in December to the tune of 300,000 plus people, vote for the Democrats. I'm not telling you this because I want you to vote for Republicans. I don't know who the hell to tell you to vote for at this point. Fight on this one. We have 800,000 law enforcement agents in a country of about 360 million. From October 1st to the end of this year, we let in 765,000 plus illegal immigrants. What I really love about this is this ease in which we lie to the American public, whether it's vetting them at the border, of being able to assimilate them, or possibly having the need to deport them. I want to talk about this issue with this whole thing with gun control in the country while we're at it. We suddenly have come to the realization that the insurrection was done unarmed, which is, I guess, maybe we should go back in history and talk to the founding fathers about the need for guns in this society. I'm not a particular enthusiast, although some people might think I am. They're a tool of my trade. Sometimes they're like pieces of artwork, like a fast car. It's just amazing that they make them that fast. Said that we need firearms. Unfortunately, we've created the need for them more and more as time clicks off. We've yet to account for what happened to this generation of children that dropped in our lap April 20th of 1999, Columbine. By the way, there was no assault rifle used there. They used IEDs, I understand, and some rather low-grade 9mm pistols, etc., that carried out what they wanted to carry out. We do nothing but intentionally mislead the public. Where's the conversation on a more daily basis about the mental health problem we have in this country? Why isn't the public outraged that we're talking about putting about $180 billion into the Ukraine if the Democrats get the next $65 billion that they're trying to muscle out of us in lieu of supporting or protecting our borders? Why isn't that money being infused into our minority communities or any children, regardless of ethnicity, religious denomination, or indigent? What's going on in this country? And these aren't complex thinking processes I go through. They're rather simple, basic, and fundamental. I have to tell you something that you might find interesting. And maybe I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to anyway. When I was in law enforcement, you couldn't give me a paper. I didn't drink coffee. You couldn't give me a Coke. I wouldn't eat if you gave me half price. Everything comes at a price. It's your honor, your integrity, and your trustworthiness. And what we've learned about America, everything has a price. We've sold the soul of this country. Most importantly, we've sold the future of our children here. And now we've got to figure out, can we get this genie back in the bottle? Guys, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to continue this conversation. I want to further this conversation about gun control. They keep throwing this out at you as if they're ever going to accomplish this. It isn't happening. What we should be talking about is managing guns in our country more intelligently. I encourage you to become part of this conversation and critique us critically if you so choose. We'd be happy to have you on, to be very honest, if you don't agree with us, because I'm not looking for people that do agree with me. We need to try to realign all of our thinking into some stream of commonality. It's just common sense that we're going to be of different opinion on various topics. OperationTruthOfficial@gmail.com is that vehicle into Tom and myself, the producers of the show, and the architect of this, Brian Williams. We're all interested in hearing what you have to say. I'm not looking for people to agree with me. I'm not looking to tell you who to vote for. I'm just trying to give you food for thought. We'll be right back, guys. Stay with us.
Hi, everyone. I am TJ Stone, the producer of Operation Truth, and I'm just taking a moment here to remind you to go follow us at Operation Truth Official on TikTok, and you can find us at Operation Truth Official on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We don't do as much on Instagram for reasons. On X, formerly known as Twitter, you can find us at Operation Truth and the number 7, Operation Truth 7, and always email us at operationtruthofficial@gmail.com. Be a part of this conversation. Join the operation.
After our short break, I appreciate you listening today. I was talking about this whole issue around guns. Something I found out recently through a friend of mine who owns a couple of firearm stores in New York, out in Nassau County and one in Suffolk County, is that approximately 17 gun stores have opened up in Nassau and Suffolk counties. These are counties that are contiguous to and just east of the city of New York. I guess they want to continue to tell you that we're going to have gun legislation. It just isn't so. To remind everyone, something that took place in New York recently was a Supreme Court ruling that says the state of New York and the city of New York can no longer conditionally issue you a concealed weapons permit. What that means is that you don't have to give them a reason anymore, just by virtue of the fact, if you apply for it, you comply with the mandate that they present to you, they have to give you the permit. What's even more interesting is 17 stores have opened in Nassau and Suffolk County. I'm not saying they're all going to be viable, but it's a tell. Nassau and Suffolk County are so heavily armed, it's alarming. I've had a lot of exposure to parts of this country where they say their guns are plentiful. There's probably more guns than there's food on their tables half the time. California, just to let everyone know, I went out there in 1989 pursuing my business. It was a very gun liberal state. You could casually transfer firearms between individuals, no licensing requirement. You had to have a license to carry concealed weapons, which were pretty obtainable at the time. They had gun shows out there that were alarming. I attended one of them. It was alarming. It was the size of 3 airplane hangars, basically. California is not as liberal as people think. It's fractured just like the state of New York is. The southern part of the state towards Orange County, San Diego County are a bit more conservative. As you go further north, as you know, take a look at San Francisco. That's the byproduct of liberalism. And interestingly enough about that, so you don't get the wrong idea, well, as conservative as I am, I'm very socially open-minded or liberal. That's just how God built me. I think we need to let people live independent of whether or not they agree with what you think or you don't think, your lifestyle, your culture, religion, ethnicity. You got to let people live. You got to let them breathe. That's what really this is about today, guys. But Tom, I think you probably what's going on in your state in Virginia in relationship to gun laws? You up to date on anything there?
No, I haven't heard anything about the, major proposals here. I think one of the issues for Virginia is that people were expecting, especially after Glenn Youngkin became governor almost 2 years ago, that that the state was going to possibly turn red, that it was going to become more Republican than Democrat, and especially statewide. We already had that issue for the DC area or for Norfolk, certain areas of Virginia that were already very blue, very Democratic. Then the general election just happens this past November because they have elections on the off year for their legislature, and instead of the prediction or the hope, I guess, for Youngkin and others was that the Republican Party was going to come out with both houses. Instead, they don't have either one. So now you have a Democratic legislature, and I haven't seen, I think they get sworn into office this month or something, but I haven't seen where there's any major proposals for gun control or any of those kind of issues yet that's come out of the now Democratic legislature. They're still trying to analyze how that happened. Did Governor Youngkin offer too severe of abortion legislation, shortening the time that a woman could get an abortion?
I do want to continue this discussion in regards to Virginia and the past November 23 election cycle that took place there, where they lost locally the House and their Senate within the state of Virginia. Well, keep bumping up against this pro-choice issue, Republicans, and you should expect more of this, just for the record. The same thing took place, by the way, November 8th of 2022, when they were all predicting the big red wave according to the polling. I love the polling. That's another discussion we'll get into, because they're basically worth nothing. I don't even know why they poison our brain with these polls to make you think something's going to happen when it turns out it doesn't. But to get back to this discussion about pro-choice, the conservative element in this country is having a hard time getting the memo. My personal beliefs, I don't believe that abortion should be used as birth control. That's how I feel. But I will say this to you. There are circumstances that could rear their head that might legitimately give reason to have an abortion. This is the most slippery discussion we have today in America. That's just the way it is, baby. In relationship to rape, incest, and ectopic pregnancy, these are three exemptions. Now, Texas didn't see fit to write them in, which confuses me, and it alarms me a little bit, because you've got to be a bit more open-minded. To break this whole discussion down in regards to the abortion issue, the women should be leading the discussion here. And men, I hate to break it to you, where you used to have your hand on the throttle, take a back seat and learn how to unconditionally support your women. One question that does need to be answered unequivocally, and again, I go back and tell you that we've destroyed the credibility in science and medicine, courtesy of politicizing everything, courtesy of our elected officials and our media. We need to determine, when does life actually begin? That's one thing I would like to know. And then start a conversation there with some civility and some respect attached to it, which has left the conversation, by the way, both of these concepts, so we can figure out how to make women comfortable with this issue. This is not a male-driven discussion. We're not the host during these pregnancies. Women are. They should have the louder voice, the majority of the opinion. They should tell us how we feel, and we should listen attentively. And please stop telling me about what your religion tells you, because this boy sat here and went to 16 years at Catholic school. I had no bones to pick with the Catholic Church, but no birth control, no divorce, no abortion, no gay marriage, no gay rights, although I'm starting to hear a little lean coming out of the Vatican lately. I just ask you to do me a favor. Please get in the real world with me here. And that's what's missing here. I know what everybody thinks about the way it should be. Sometimes that just doesn't work in the real world. If you don't believe me, look at Catholicism. And the reason I point the finger at them is because I'm most familiar. I don't know what goes on in Judaism or Islam in regards to these discussions, but I know the Catholic Church. 16 years of this I went through. I had to take 12 credits in theology to graduate. I don't know what planet we're all living on, but a lot of these problems are emotionally driven. Nothing is more emotionally driven than this abortion discussion. Give it up, guys. Try to have a heart. Stop invalidating the way women feel. It doesn't mean that we all don't value life. I hope that we do. And for the knuckleheads that are talking about late-term pregnancy abortions like at birth or whatever, get in the real world also, because you might find yourself charged with a crime. I've heard, and this is disturbing to hear and to say, that they're saying they want to terminate the pregnancy after the child is delivered. According to my understanding, that's a murder. Tom, are you back with us here, buddy? Are you back with me? I guess not. In any event, I do want to go back into this gun control discussion, because first thing we need to do is abandon this word control. Nobody likes that word control. It's got a bad ring to it. Why don't we start calling it gun management? Why don't we first acknowledge the fact that the common denominator to mass shootings in this country are mental health, and look a little further, you're going to see failed parenting, or that these children are not only disenfranchised from the schools they attend, but from their families. You see, for those of us in New York that live in a city like New York, get all this medical care at your disposal. You know, we have an incredible hospital for special surgery. There's Cornell Weill, New York Presbyterian, cardiac, Mount Sinai, Lenox Hill. We got New York, New York Langone is what it is, excuse me. You know, when you go into different parts of the country, they're not saturated with medical support. And that lends itself even to discussions about mental health. You know, if you're in an Oklahoma, I'm not being critical of Oklahoma, I'm just stating something factually to you. You may not have access to people on the cutting edge in psychology or psychiatry, which is what a lot of these children need. They need counseling. Let me give you the scenario that happens. You're living in a more remote part of the country. Your child starts to demonstrate some type of characteristic in their behavior that's alarming. And instead of trying to figure out the vehicle to get them treatment, we step away and push away from them because we can't manage them. Guys, I know what this is about. I've traveled this country, north and south, east and west. I've had the privilege of learning about who's living here, you know, and I never take for granted anything that I've had at my behest in the city of New York. But we have a mental health problem, and we've got a failed parenting problem. You know, I liken this thing to having children is, it seemed like a good idea at the time. I've done a lot of wacky things in my lifetime. Nothing compares to the responsibility and the accountability I have to my children and my wife. Nothing. And I've had an incredible life. I've had a lot of good fortune, to be very candid with you, but I've learned a lot along the way. In regards back to this pro-choice issue, we need to start to have some type of civil exchange. For those individuals, that small, minuscule demographic attached to, you know, killing one another over this issue, whether they're pro-choice or pro-life, you just need to be put into alignment and have some consequences employed. And believe me, today with technology, it's almost impossible to commit a crime, which, by the way, makes me think about the border again. I hate to go back to the border, but I don't want to digress. Just stick with me, guys. In light of the fact that we need an immigration policy and the world has changed and our country's changed, why don't we try taking the DNA and fingerprints of everybody coming into this country, regardless of their point of origin? I don't want to continue on this immigration issue because you see it's a real sore subject for me, because we're just doing everyone a grave disservice, including the migrants. But back to this whole issue with pro-choice, that's what happened in Virginia, folks. The Democrats are very clever. They're far more clever than the Republicans are. Every time we come near an election, they make sure we bring two words into the discussion: Donald Trump, who's polarizing, and pro-choice, which pisses women off and makes them vote for people that support them. It's amazing that issue it actually takes precedence over the safety of their children. They're more concerned about how that discussion goes than the one dealing with the borders. And whether people know this or not, here we go back to the border, guys. This border issue is far more serious. You know, we didn't talk about this in other podcasts about the crimes being committed by people crossing this border illegally, by the number of individuals that we're apprehending here after the fact, that we then further find out that they've had murder warrants for them in countries like Colombia or cities like Brazil. This is a problem, guys. But in any case, I don't mean to bounce around on you. The reality of the situation is no matter where I bounce with you, it all comes back full circle. All these things are going to impact the future of our kids. There's no nice way to say it. Guys, we're going to take a quick break and we're going to come back. We're going to continue this conversation. You know, I could beat this thing with gun control into the gun management. I want to change the terminology until people get the memo. It's very simple. In order to survive, sometimes you must change with the times. There seems to be this reluctance on the part of the NRA, for example, who believes if you can see lightning and hear thunder, you should own a gun. I have a different approach to this. It's a rather simple approach. Everybody that wants the guns that law enforcement carries or military carry, let us vet you. Let us put you through psychological screening, criminal history, firearms training, education as to the law, especially use of force, and in particular, use of deadly physical force. Where's the downside? I'm prepared to give you a permit, let you traverse the United States, all 50 states, the District of Columbia, and the U.S. territories, a privilege that I have as a result of a law that was signed in July of 2004 by President Bush, and then a subsequent enhancement of the law signed by Barack Obama, November of 2010. I want to give you the same privilege, but you've got to give me what I've had to comply with. That's not an unreasonable expectation. And where that leads to is preventing people who are mentally and emotionally unstable from getting guns. Now, there's another discussion attached to this, has to do with HIPAA laws. We have a load of people that are going into psychologists and psychiatrists' offices, or coming to the attention of the public or institutions that are supposed to protect the public, that are going, and we don't want to tell you about it because we might violate the HIPAA law. Maybe we need to re-examine this HIPAA law when it comes down to something dealing with your mental health.
Yeah, I'm back.
Okay, very good. Tom, I was talking, I just want to bring you up to speed because we had a technical difficulty, ladies and gentlemen. Tom was talking about Virginia and this last go round November of 2023, where they didn't quite fare as well as they thought they were going to. And I pointed out the fact that once again, Tom, they brushed up against this abortion issue, number one. And number two, this whole thing about everybody telling you what's guiding their feelings about everything. It's religion. And I talked about some of the deficiencies, even on the platforms involving religion. And I mentioned the fact that I went through 16 years of Catholic school, and Catholicism lends itself to never being divorced, never using birth control, never an abortion, and they're anti-gay, which, you know, you just have to get in the real world with me, Tom, and just let people live the way we all would like to live. But I went back again, and I was talking about this whole issue with the gun control once again, and suggesting that the public, in light of the fact that times have changed, and they want to now own firearms that you and I carried as law enforcement agents, high-capacity semi-automatic pistols, even assault rifles. Guys, this whole thing about assault rifles has been misconstrued, and I'll tell you why in a second. But I suggested, Tom, they go through psychological screening, criminal history, firearms training, and education in the law, especially use of deadly physical force. Guys, this whole thing with assault rifles, they use in less than 2% of your crimes in the country every year. Don't believe me? Go fact check this. It's not even up there. I know it's sexy. That's a big thing, you know, sexy, and, you know, you got to have swagger in this country. I got that. But this is a complete distortion as to what's going on here. More people are using knives, or if they're running it down with cars. I guess we suggest we take your cutlery and your vehicles. I don't know where to go with this conversation, guys. But by the way, do you see anyone on either side of the aisle or the media trying to have a sane, logical, rational discussion about how to manage this mental health problem that we're having in the country, and in its immediacy, how to prevent them from getting their hands on firearms? You know, let me remind everybody of something else. After this pandemic, if you owned a gun store and you walked in there, they were trying so hard to keep their lights up, they would have sold anything to anybody just to be able to not lock the door You have to understand human nature. But we are feeding and fueling this problem because of our remissful approach to this thing and our less than honorable telling of the truth. Stop misleading the public that we're having gun control. We're not. There's at least 50 million assault rifles in this country. And I'll tell you something else that's going to alarm you. In certain parts of this country, we have individuals that are manufacturing these firearms that the ATF has no knowledge exist. I'll tell you about the ATF, not their fault. After you fill out these National Criminal Incident Background Check, NICS, the system is purged. 20 years after the 4473s, that federal firearms form that Mr. Biden falsified, which is a felony and has a mandatory 10-year sentence attached to it. After 20 years, they're gone. Prior to the 1940s, we didn't have serial numbers. What is this exercise about misleading the public, no matter what topic we talk to you about, whether it's the borders, guns, the crime in your city? These are fixable. These are fixable problems. Maybe part of the problem, and Tom, you can speak to this in a second, is all of our elected officials must be on the dole. And as far as the game show hosts that prop themselves up as journalists, getting these ridiculous salaries, who are speaking out of the wrong side of their rear end, maybe you all need to shut up for a moment. Let somebody tell how to get us through these dilemmas. I yield back to you, Tom, because you went dark on me momentarily.
Yeah, the problem, Lou, is that you have these same communities wanting to defund the police or reduce the number of police officers available. Now, how do you justify that and then tell people, we're not going to protect you, which should be the first and most important function of your government, keep you safe. And then when they say, no, we're not going to keep you safe. We don't have enough police. We don't want to have enough police. We're not going to have enough police officers on the street. And oh, by the way, you can't defend yourself. We're not going to let you have guns on top of it. We'll just let you be sacrificed to the criminal element because we don't want to have police to protect you and we don't want to let you protect yourself. So I think that that's where the hypocrisy comes in, is for the government to be doing that, to be saying, we're not going to let you protect yourself and we're not going to protect you either. Too bad.
I want to comment on that, Tom, because you're onto something good there, and that lends itself to what's going on in the Ukraine, where we're arming their populace so they can fight this invasion force called Russians, and now Israel. I absolutely guarantee you that many people in Israel wish they had had guns in their homes at the time that Hamas had crossed their border with the intent to inflict a massive amount of harm. Something that I find really interesting also is that all the people that really want gun control, they're all protected by public servants. You can take Hillary Clinton, for example. My own opinion of her has nothing to do with what I'm about to say next. She's got quite a Secret Service detail, more than her husband. In fact, we happen to know her husband has dropped a Secret Service detail to go gallivanting. I won't tell you how I know that, but I know it's factually driven. I don't understand why Mrs. Clinton, Hillary, doesn't get the same security detail as a former first lady. In other words, I worked with Mrs. Reagan on a number of occasions. She came to events that I rented security for in California. She had a chauffeur who was a Secret Service agent. She had a gentleman sitting what we call the right front of the recorder seat, and she had an advanced person. Go take a look at Hillary Clinton's security detail. Why are the taxpayers paying for this? I'm not saying don't give her coverage. I'm saying don't give her any more than any of our other first ladies have had. And if you need it, why don't you pay for it yourself? What is this overburdening the taxpayer? But I want to go back again, Tom, and just remind everyone about this situation in the Ukraine. We're flooding this country with AK-47s, which is the Russian version of a very efficient assault rifle, and our own M4s, these infamous guns that are used in our mass shootings here on occasion. What is the deal with this country here? You said it, Tom. They should be protected, but not us. We should arm other countries, but not our own. I tell the American public this: thank God this country is armed, because you can see the nonsense we're being subjected to on a daily basis right now. Being armed, you can only imagine whose will they would impose if you didn't have the ability to resist. And I'm never suggesting that you resist, quote unquote, in a conventional sense. I don't think the answer to this stupidity that's ongoing in our media and with our elected officials is violence. That's not the answer. We need to keep a cool head. One thing I learned in life is the hotter it gets, the cooler you need to stay. This is a time for cool heads, but this is the time for the truth. I yield back to you, Tom, because I want to continue your conversation in regards to Virginia in particular, because we both know that fly in the ointment, Tom, and you touched on it, was this discussion about pro-choice. And that upends the Republicans every time they come near an election cycle.
Yeah, Lou, it's going to be something we'll have to watch what the new legislature, now that that's Democratic controlled, both houses of the Virginia legislature by Democrats. So we'll have to see what they do, what laws they try to pass, or to what extent Governor Youngkin can veto them and keep them from being enacted. But I think, that was a huge surprise to everybody, because they thought that with the momentum created by Youngkin, that good chance that the both houses would become Republican, and instead they didn't. And one of the issues that's been cited by pundits, and I don't know if it's for a fact or not, was that Youngkin had proposed abortion laws that were more stringent on women, that they only had up to so long, so many weeks, and that was it. And that a lot of people were saying that it was too short a time. Most women don't even know they're pregnant within that time frame, and that they should have been given more flexibility in, that they went from one extreme to the other. No stopping an abortion, even an after delivery murder of a baby, to making it so tight that most women might not even know they're pregnant. So I don't know, I haven't seen any additional reporting on that since. And now that, the new houses are now taking their offices, we'll see what legislation they propose now in the next year.
Tom, in a broader sense, I mean, and I was speaking about this when you encountered your technical difficulty. This is a conversation that women should have the louder voice in, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And unfortunately, as we have just systematically and methodically destroyed the credibility in our institutions, science and medicine being two of them, we just need a definitive time, that can be substantiated through medicine in particular, that tells us when there is life there, and then start the conversation again, because there are a lot of variables attached to this discussion. It's easy to sit, especially as a man, and be so cavalier in telling a woman what you think they should do. You're not emotionally attached to that. I can tell you, after having 4 children myself, it's a lot in my wife's journey, to be honest with you. I didn't bring these children into this world. I wasn't their host through a 9-month period, nurture them. I just think we need to try to step this back a little bit, take the religion out of the discussion, because everybody's ideas about abortion are being driven by God. Guys, you don't want to hear what I have to say about this topic. We need to take a step back. And as I accuse the Republicans of, oftentimes, you need to become more socially sensitive, period. And it's not just with women, it's how you fail to reach out to the minority community. There's a lot to talk about. Tom, I want to bump into this whole political discussion, which we did in the last podcast. We were talking about viable candidates, and something I want to say to everyone, and you need to believe this, and I'm not a Trump fan. I think Donald Trump did some good things for this country during his administration, probably made some mistakes. We all make mistakes every day you get up. Independent of that, he needs to try to control what he says, because words hurt. But I do want you to know this. We may be experiencing something where Democrats are testing the water to see exactly how much control they can impose or exert in influencing who's allowed to run. I didn't know that a political mechanism had the prerogative to decide who you were allowed to vote for. And that's what it looks like is going on in Colorado and Maine right now. This is going to hit the Supreme Court. But guys, please know this. This is very dangerous. This is very dangerous. For those people in Colorado that support Trump, why should you not be given the opportunity to demonstrate that support? He wasn't charged with a crime. What's so interesting about this, Tom? I listened to Joe Biden accuse the president of insurrection. I heard him. I watched him on a tarmac or wherever he was coming from. A journalist posed the question at him and he said, yes, he committed insurrection. Well, why didn't you charge him with that crime? Why don't you give me a real good definition of what that word means and then charge him with a crime? Otherwise, why are you punishing him? Why are you depriving him of his civil right? Due process. Just curious. I don't understand what the Democrats don't understand and what the Republicans don't understand. You both are destroying this culture. That's all there is to it. And what's really alarming is that there's 535 of you that really control the government, not the president. If a president steps into office in the House and the Senate of the opposing party, you're not getting anything done, folks. That's all there is to it. What's even more interesting is when the president has the House and the Senate, they still don't do anything. Am I right, Tom?
Well, basically, but I think that, the dysfunction that we have seen in the Congress, in the White House has gotten so much worse. And I think it doesn't help when you have the theoretical leader of the country be so impaired and so compromised as Joe Biden is. And they can say whatever they want to say about him. Oh, he's a nice guy. He's none of those. And to look back at his record and his record of corruption and bias and racism, it's unacceptable. And yet he's got all these followers because for them, anything but a Republican. So if any Democrat's going to have the support of the other Democrats, no matter what they do. And I think that's where the problem is. And we've lost sight of that. What it was like even a few short years ago, well, maybe more than a few short, back in the Nixon administration, for example, when Nixon was engulfed, I should say, in the controversy of Watergate. And it looked like he engaged in the cover-up of the crime of what the burglars had done at the Democratic offices. And you have a Republican Congress led by a Republican Senator, Barry Goldwater, who had been a presidential candidate of the Republican Party in 1964, running against Johnson. You have a Republican president, Nixon, and you have Goldwater lead a delegation of Republican senators to the White House and tell Nixon, you better resign because you're going to get impeached, and we, your own party, are going to convict you if your impeachment comes to the U.S. Senate for adjudication. And that's when Nixon decides, okay, he quits. Well, now, fast forward to the Biden administration, it doesn't matter what he does or how much physical evidence they have of his wrongdoing, the Democrats stand by him. And they've already indicated they'll be 100% by him if he's impeached and the impeachment goes to the Senate for prosecution, which is what's required. The Supreme Court Chief Justice presides in the Senate chamber over the impeachment trial, and it takes 67 senators to find the person being impeached, whether it's president, vice president, other government official. But in this case, the president, 67 senators have to vote conviction. And you've already got the Democrats saying, we don't care what he did. We're going to exonerate him. And so that helps bring, much of the government to the standstill. You look at the committees investigating Biden, how much more time do they have to invest in gathering, 500 financial sheets showing corruption? What do they need? 1,000, 10,000? How many more documents do they need from the banks, from the transfer services, from around the world to show the level of corruption? And no matter how much they prove and how much they show and how many receipts they have, it's like, doesn't matter. You hear guys like Jamie Raskin from Maryland, Congressman, saying pretty much, we don't care what he did. He's innocent in our eyes. Doesn't matter. So that kind of partisanship is what's bringing us apart, I think.
What's being suggested, Tom, now also is that it's going to become a common practice that when you leave office, we're going to start to pursue you to prosecute. That's what we're doing with Donald Trump right now. And guys, what I was saying before was if you think it's Trump, it isn't. This might become a common practice to the Democrats, but the Democrats better understand this. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. Joe Biden might find himself leaving office, and then if the Congress is controlled by the Republicans, they'll find out they're going to try to criminally prosecute
Right.
him.
And that's one of the
independently of
issues that Trump has taken to the Supreme Court now, the so-called immunity aspect. That if you're making your best judgment decisions while you're president, you're going to have immunity from people second guessing that and charging you the rest of your life for every little decision that you made. So that's something that the Senate theoretically is going to pass judgment on in the next few months.
Yeah, but there's
of
a
that
difference here,
issue.
Tom. There's a difference here, Tom. What we're talking about, them potentially pursuing with Joe Biden has nothing to do with decisions he made regarding policies, or how would you say, incidental to his holding office, which is Trump's issue. We're talking about behavior that is criminally attached.
Yeah,
Like
bribery
bribery.
obviously is a crime.
Right.
That's
Well-
criminal. But in the case of Trump, being charged with, did he make questions about the election in 2020? Did he do various things that were presidential? And now they're saying, we don't care. You didn't have a right to do that. You didn't have a right to ask questions. You didn't have a right to pursue any of those issues that were normal issues to be pursued by a president. And I think that that's a difference between the immunity from being, a flat out bribery taker or criminal.
Well, my issue with Joe Biden deals with simply compromising the safety and the security of this country, which I don't think took place with anything that Donald Trump did, quite candidly. And I think there's a lot more coming down the pike. I don't understand the Republicans as to why they're not pursuing more important issues regarding the conduct of this president. The head of Homeland Security, Mayorkas, Merrick Garland, and our vice president. I don't understand where we seem to be incapable of discerning between lines that we can't cross. And one of them deals with the safety and the security of this nation that I remind everyone, our FBI director, pointed out the fact that our southern border is a threat to our national security. I don't know why this isn't being pursued more fervently by our FBI, by Homeland Security itself, by the Attorney General, and by the Republicans, I might state.
Agree. I agree with
You understand what I'm saying, Tom? I'm listening to all this crap about bribery, and they had shell corporations, and they had bank accounts for all the family members.
No, you're right. The security of the country is first and foremost. However, don't discount $50 million in bribes. I mean, that's beyond the pale. Like I said earlier, we've had politicians like governors and mayors that took $10,000 for their campaign to appoint somebody to a certain position in the government, or their kid or something to a cabinet position. But all of those pale. I don't know. In my mind, I cannot remember a politician, much less a current president, that engaged in the level of bribery that this president has been involved in for many years. And when you're talking $30-40 million from China that's been documented by Peter Schweitzer and his investigative team, or the tens of millions from the Ukraine or Romania, or the mayor's wife of Moscow. This is unbelievable. And by time and the committees investigating say they keep finding more and more and more money, that it could be up over $50 million. That's unbelievable. That's unbelievable to me that would even be a non-issue, much less the safety of the country being a non-issue.
And I want to ask you this question, Tom, especially you, having been a former FBI assistant director with as much responsibility as you were trusted with. Do you believe that the security of this nation has been compromised?
Absolutely.
Who's better?
Absolutely.
Better suited? That's my point, Tom. Who better suited to make that statement than you? That's what you did. You protected this country. As police officers locally, we protected communities, what we call our geographical area of employment. As an FBI assistant director or special agent in charge, or whatever position you hold in the FBI, your responsibility deals with the country as a whole. No one better suited to support my question. Has the country's safety and security been compromised during this administration?
It's been compromised, absolutely. And what we don't know and what will remain to be seen is whether any one of the many terrorist groups or other nefarious groups that have entered this country are going to commit a terrorist act in the near future as a result of the lack of security at our borders. We don't know that yet. That'll be remain to be seen if we get attacked, what level it will be, who will commit it, and how we should have had a secure border all along.
We're going to close for today, guys. We hope you've enjoyed listening to what we've had to say. We're not trying to tell you who to vote for. We're trying to give you something to think about. I am not biased in the slightest. I don't care about the Republicans and I don't care about the Democrats. I care about my children, to be honest with you. And maybe for the first time in my life, I've got something that really troubles me on a daily basis because I see the trajectory of this country, just like Tom does. Tom sees where we're going. We're heading into a wall right now. And these things are as blatant and as obvious as the nose on my face. Your borders, your major cities, your economy, this lie about your energy sector, your foreign policy. Every direction we turn, we're in crisis, contrary to the lies you hear being promoted in the media. If you don't believe me, please go out and do your own independent research, which is what I encourage you to do. I have oftentimes said, both on this podcast and when the podcast had been branded Between the Lines, I don't want to spoon feed you. I want to give you something to think about, and don't be spoon fed by this media, because there are a lot of untruths that are being told to you, like about the condition of this economy. That's just to start with, about the crime in your major cities and why it's so pervasive and why corporate entities are leaving cities like San Francisco in record numbers, or the state of California in record numbers. You know, we have so much to talk about, guys. You know, we almost don't have enough time. We're going to have to cut it for today. I appreciate everyone that's listened. I encourage you to please encourage other people to listen to what we have to say. And I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. I always like to say, see the forest for the trees. This has been Operation Truth. You can reach Tom and myself at operationtruthofficial@gmail.com. And I thank you for listening and watching today.